Joining me now from the Washington Free Beacon is Matthew Foldi. Matthew, good morning. And how damaging has this been to President Biden, this flip-flop? Because he was heavily criticized on Monday when he basically kicked it down to the states to deal with COVID when he had that meeting with the governors.
Well, good morning, Cheryl. Thanks for having me. I think this is incredibly damaging for the president, who has passed the buck and passed the blame on everything from coronavirus to crime to Afghanistan to every one of his failures. It seems now in this case the buck stops with the president's Twitter account. But he campaigned on there being a federal solution to the coronavirus. His now chief of staff, Ron Klain, said the same thing multiple times. Obviously, President Biden himself, as a candidate, claimed multiple times that he had a federal solution, putting out a multi-point plan for a federal solution. So it's incredibly damaging, I think, to the president politically. I think it's also probably legally damaging to the president because he has this OSHA vaccine mandate, and all of a sudden now he says that there's no federal solution to the coronavirus. Well, why is he then attempting to implement a federal vaccine mandate through OSHA? So we've seen that Ron Klain's Twitter account has been used against the president's agenda in courts that have ruled that Ron Klain's retweets are in fact endorsements. So I think this is an incredibly damaging moment for Biden politically because he now is rejecting the premise that got him elected, and now he's obviously trying to walk it back a little bit. We'll see how successfully. It also, though, could potentially damage his attempt to implement this emergency OSHA mandate that is such an emergency that it hasn't been implemented, even though he first announced it several months ago. So not a good look for the president. We're already seeing, someone in the administration try and walk back this, latest Biden gaffe.
Well, and I think the OSHA mandate, that's just going to end up in the courts.
It's definitely it's already being litigated right now, but I think this, look, if I'm trying to argue against the OSHA mandate, there's hardly a better case to use against it now than the president's own words saying that there is no federal solution to it. So I think that the case against the, emergency mandate grows stronger by the day, thanks to the president himself. We'll see, obviously, what ultimately ends up happening with that implementation. But yeah, you're right. He's trying to do cleanup now, and his federal plan isn't actually addressing the biggest problem that Americans are having with the coronavirus right now, which is that they're waiting in line for multiple hours on end to get COVID tests that don't even give them results in time to fly for Christmas. We saw hundreds of flights canceled and delayed across the country. So the plan that they are now rushing out to clean up his gaffe doesn't actually address what Americans need, which is rapid access to testing facilities. And then they announced that the quarantine is shrinking from 10 days to 5 days. They callously did it right after Christmas. So Americans who were abiding by this 10-day, isolation period are, out of luck. But fortunately, it's being implemented just in time for the NFL playoffs. So I think every attempt that they've made to try and, mitigate the disastrous admission that he made, that again undercut his entire reason for being elected, which was to shut down the coronavirus and not the economy. Of course, we now know he's done the complete opposite. Coronavirus is, rampaging throughout the country right now. Fortunately, very few deaths, but the economy is, probably going to come to a standstill again in the winter.
Well, and he also, it's interesting that President Biden, when he was candidate Biden, repeatedly called out President Trump for his failures when it came to testing and how President Trump had handled COVID. President Trump gave us vaccines, and all that they've done now is double down on vaccinations, and they a panel of experts in October asked them to make tests available for the holidays, and they didn't want to do it. So that's on them, and I think that has been a bad moment for the president as well this week. Real quick, though, I want to ask you about Vice President Kamala Harris. She's reportedly turning to Wall Street and Silicon Valley executives for policy advice. Microsoft President Brad Smith, Cisco Systems CEO Chuck Robbins, Citigroup's Jane Fraser, among those that she's reached out to. This, as her approval rating, sits at 44%. That's the most recent Gallup number, 1% higher than President Biden's. Her disapproval, 54%. Excuse me, Matthew, your reaction to that?
Well, if Vice President Harris's outreach to these Silicon Valley executives goes, as well as her response to the border. Remember, she remains border czar. If it goes anywhere near as well as her response to the border, we are in serious trouble for that. But yeah, obviously, I think this is an attempt to distract from the myriad of failures that Vice President Harris has. I think at this point, with her office clearing out almost all of its staff, everyone is leaving much sooner than would normally happen in a vice president's office. I think she's just looking for someone to talk to, and she's more than happy to be, palling it up with wealthy executives.
Well, one of her former staffers, when she was in California, called her a bully. That's pretty damaging. Matthew Foldi, Matthew, thank you for being here. Great perspective from you.
Thanks, Cheryl. Have a great day, and Happy New Year.